And I want to start off things, so we're a little behind schedule, so I'm just going to jump right in. And I have a little bomb I want to start off this little workshop presentation with, which is very simply this: is if we believe that the gospel of grace is the true life-changing gospel message of God, the very power that changes lives, changes people, and is the very, very foundation of everything else in the Christian life. I think that's what we think of true about this gospel. Then grace churches that teach the gospel faithfully, ought to be, don't you think, the largest and most influential and fastest growing churches out there? Like, that's how it should be, if that is indeed the gospel that we speak. And I've noticed sometimes that's not always the case. And why is that? Why is it sometimes that there's a tension there? In fact, I've honestly met many people in ministry who've told me, like, hey, if you are true to the gospel, if you are true to the scriptures, and if you teach it accurately, your church will be in decline because you'll be oppressed, or you'll be and the enemy will be fighting against you. And there's only one verse I'm going to share this entire presentation. It's this right here, Matthew 16:18. I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overpower it. We stop believing this to be true. We stop believing that Jesus is going to take his church, and there's nothing that Satan can do about it, that the church will overcome, that it will win in the end. And we totally forget that. We ignore that. We act like this is not true, and it is heartbreaking to me when I believe this. I believe this is true, that we can walk by faith and do what is right and see God radically transform lives. And that's been my experience as a pastor over the last 2.5 years, as I took on a small little church in faith, believing that this is true. And so real quickly, just a quick little introduction. I'm no one important. You shouldn't know me. You don't need to know me. It's not really important. I did do some training. I went with New Tribes, which is now called Ethnos 360. I've gone through their training, worked overseas for a couple years. I have an engineering degree from Oregon State University, so I'm not from around here, right? Okay, so I'm a little ways away. But I'm an engineer by trade prior to going to ministry. And I also have been going to school, getting a master's degree from Schaefer, but I'm not even done yet. So in a sense, many of you here have master's degrees. There's no doctorate here. You don't really need to listen to this story, because I'm kind of like that person that the last speaker spoke about, that paramedic. Like, there's nothing particularly special about me that you should be listening. But yet I have a story of seeing God work in the lives, not just of this little church, but in the lives of young people there in Western Washington State. And there's something about Washington and Oregon you need to know. If you were evaluating that area as a overseas country, if it was its own country, it would be considered an unreached people group, because there's so few believers there in the Northwest. And so it is an opportunity. The fields are ripe. There's all kinds of folks who need to hear the truth right there. And so my last thing is, what I'm passionate about is about sharing a clear grace gospel, free grace. That's why we're all here. In fact, I kind of assume that if you're here, you already understand that. If not, you should be at Charlie Bing's session. Scott was right. That is exactly where you should be. But my other passion is to be hearing, well done, my good and faithful servant. That's what I want to hear. I hope that's what you want to hear when you arrive at eternity, that we've ran the race in this life well. So let me tell you about my little church. This was, the church is called Lacey Chapel. This was what I arrived to 2.5 years ago, and it was in decline. There was the month before I got there, the average attendance was 37 in the room that seats 270 or so. So it maybe felt like this room right now, right? So there's lots of seating and just a couple of us in here. And that's what it felt like every Sunday. They had a wonderful, godly man who had been a pastor for a long time. He was retiring somewhere in the 65 range. And so that's where they're at. And if you looked at a chart of their attendance, it had a distinct slope. This is the last 14 years worth of data. The bottom of the arrow is when I joined that church, where I became a pastor there. And it had been in a long, slow decline. In fact, if you look at the statistics, most churches in the United States, they're on that general glide path, right? They're all going down. slowly. Not many are like collapsing instantly, but many churches are on this slow glide path. And we didn't experience that. In these last 2.5 years, we've experienced the opposite. And so the only little bit of Greek I'm going to share in this presentation is right here. This is theta. This is the difference in the angle between like the standard normal way. Yay math, that's right. And the direction that we're trying to go, or the direction that God has been taking us. And it's not to say that there's anything special that I've done. In fact, if you ask me, I'd say most of the good things we've done is when I've gotten out of the way and letting God and the gospel be effective. And it's really more than anything is when we get out of the way and see God at work. And so this is what our little church looks like now. It kind of looks the same, right? But right now last Sunday was my biggest Sunday since I've been there. We had just under 120 people. And even more exciting, in the last, 3 months ago, we did a round of baptisms, and I baptized 9 folks, six adults and 3 kids, which it's not big numbers. But at the time, our little church was, averaging 80 or 90 people. I baptized 10% of my congregation this year. If every church in America baptized 10% of its congregation every year, we wouldn't be having the problems we're having as a nation. The problem would be solved by the gospel. That's how it would work. And so this morning, pastors do that a lot, I bet. This afternoon, I want to share some practical tips on reaching the next generation in a context of church, in the context of church ministry. If more than anything else, this is a show and tell. I'm just going to share with you what we did over the last 2.5 years that caused our church to grow a lot. And it's small. In fact, if you come from a church that's big like this, these tips probably aren't going to be all that useful for you. But if you're like the standard normal American church that's 50 to 200 or so, I pray this will be very useful for you as you put these things into practice or consider them as we try to reach out to the next generation. And so I'm not a church growth expert. That's really not my jam. But really what I'm passionate about is seeing how can we speak truth and how can we package that in a way that the next generation will hear it and respond to it. So we're going to skip the doctrine. I'm assuming you already know it. And we're going to go straight to practice. How do we do it? Okay, so here's my tips. This is what we did, how we did it. Your mileage will vary, right? I'm not saying that these are any of the answers. I'm just, again, showing the story, okay? So the first thing, and again, I look at everything as an engineer. It's a little bit of occupational hazard. But this is how I think of, if I'm going to reach anyone with the gospel, the first step in the process is someone has to be listening to me. Someone has to be listening to me. And so if I want to... and the obvious police might be showing up here real shortly if I make statements like this whole time, like, hey, how are we going to reach people if they're not listening? But if you are trying to reach out to the next generation and the next generation are not in your church, you have a problem. Because if you don't have any folks who are of the next generation in your building and you're speaking, then nothing's going to happen. And so the very first thing you have to figure out is, well, how can I have an audience of new next generation people in a church? Because I think most of the churches that are speaking grace nationally are not necessarily big, healthy churches. That there tend to be smaller ones. And so there's the question, right? Everyone wants to know, well, how do you attract next generational people to your church? But I actually think that's the wrong question. And I'd love to have the answer to that. I think most of us would love to have the answer to that. But that's not actually the issue, because we're not trying to just reach the next generation. The gospel is for everyone. And so the real question is just in general, like, how do you get people at church at all? And again, a lot of that is from the Northwest. Here in Texas, I guess people just do it automatically, it seems like sometimes. But in the Northwest, this is not an easy question to ask, like, how do people actually show up there? But when we dug down to it, is this even deeper, foundationally, how do people find a church in the first place if they're looking? And I came up with 5 topics, 5 ways that people find a church. And it boils down into 2 categories. The first category is when they're not trying, when they weren't looking for church, but church came looking for them, meaning that someone came and invited them to come. Right? That's a way we'd like to grow. We'd love to have people in our church body going out, inviting folks to come hear the truth. That'd be lovely. And when it does happen, that's great. But there's also a second area, which is where they're actively looking. So we're going to look at those two things. If you're a Calvinist and believe in irresistible grace, that last one might get moved up into the other category, but we'll ignore that for now. But so if someone invites them, so what do you do as a church? How do you get folks to invite? Well, here's what we did. We did invite cards. They're just like little business card size cards that say, "Hey, church," and our address on the back, and we gave them out to everyone. Because it's amazing when you have that in your purse or your wallet, like a little business card, and you have a conversation about church, that you can give them an invite card and they come. It worked. In fact, when we do big fancy events, we print out little invite cards to the major events that we do, and you probably do this, right? But some of you are like, and especially small little churches like we were, you're thinking, well, hey, I can't make good-looking graphics. Like, how is anyone gonna, like these next generation folks, they care about how it looks like. I've been to a couple churches before where the program or the handouts were like, ooh, that's scary. That's not going to help you. And so this is a very practical resource I would encourage you to check out. People know this is a problem, and they've solved it. You can go to a website and buy pre-made graphics for you. There's a great little outfit out of Texas here called Igniter Media. And I don't make any money for them, but I've been paying them some money because even though I honestly am tech savvy enough to build all my own graphics, it's the cheapest employee ever because you can pay them a couple $100s a year, and they will give you a massive database of everything, every graphics you ever want to come up with. In fact, like maybe, oh yeah, this presentation's graphics was swiped from them too, because it's worth the time. And so don't try to recreate it all. Go get it. It's a major time saver. Okay, so that's available. Just know. So the other way, so that's the invitation part, and that you kind of already know about that. The next half of this is how do you get folks who are looking for a church? And if you're looking for young people who are looking for a church, do you know how they find a church? They use this thing. You might be familiar with it. It's called a smartphone. It is the Google, the Yellow Pages, the initial drive-by, the portraits, everything for reaching out to young folks in terms of them looking for you. Because guess how every single person under the age of 40 is going to find a church? They're going to say, "Hey Siri, can I find a church in the town?" And it's going to give me a list of churches. And so this little box here is really important to be able to find yourself. And when you type in your church, if you type in church on your phone, Google's going to be very nice to you and show you your church on the list because Google knows you, right? As we were just talking about a little bit, like Google knows and it's going to give you what you want. And so, of course, you want to see your church up on the top, but Google's lying to you because they don't want to get complaints about, well, why is my thing not on top? They give you yours on top all the time unless you switch to privacy mode on your phone, incognito. And it will then give you a little bit more honesty if you go into that mode, because then you search and you get something like this where it's like, hey, my church isn't on that list anymore. And the reason why is that I don't live in Lacey. I live in Olympia. I live one town over, and so it gave me all the Olympia churches nearby. It didn't give him my church, and that's really important. If you're trying to evaluate how you're doing on the internet, is to use that privacy mode when you search for yourself. Just figure out how far down the results, where are you? My church was number 30 on the list when I got there. And so if someone they would have had to try, 20 or 30 churches before they got to us. And our church had guests, our walk-in rate of guests was about one a year, okay? They probably drove by and like, hey, we should try this one that's like right across the street or something. We had no walk-in traffic. And so they had done searches, and what you can do, though, is if you could type in Lacey churches, or you can do those things to figure out, but what we did to solve this problem is there's a number of things you can do to improve your findability on phones, and these are kind of important, but it's to make sure the name of your town and the word church are on your webpage, or are the name of your webpage, or the name of your church. My church was called Lacey Chapel, and guess who called me on the phone looking for Lacey? People wanting to get married. They'd be calling for the chapel, like, oh, do you guys do weddings there? No one was looking for Lacey Chapel when they were looking for a church. And so we literally, you're going to think this is crazy, I renamed the church, to Lacey Bible Church, so that people searching on their phones for Lacey churches would find our church. And just make sure you hear that, because everyone's going to think you're absolutely crazy. But I did just say that I renamed my church to help my Google ranking. And it is a little crazy. I totally get that. However, our walk-in rate now, after all these things, is now 1 or 2 families a week. And it was 1 family a year. And so a huge change by improving these things. It is so important. We're now number 3 on the list, and we're a tiny little church of 120. There's a couple other bigger churches in town for sure. Be smart, and you can pay for advertising to skip this whole system and get to the top, and that's okay too. But this is the privacy search here in my town. Lacey Churches, we're number 3, a tiny little church, but it's working. Okay. The other thing you should do is there's church trackers out there. The people who are looking for Grace churches, they actually find people, and it's pretty amazing. I'd say of the 60 or 70 people that we've gotten, probably 10 of them have come looking for a free Grace church. It's to me, it's amazing. Hey, there's other folks. We're not the only ones, but make sure you're out on those lists, whether it's FGAs, GESs. There's even a dispensational publishing house. If you're a dispensational church, which if you probably are, and so those are great resources. We've had people find us. Just think about it that way. If someone's going to show up there, if you're going to grow, if you're going to have young people, you need to be out there be findable. Okay. Driving by is important, right? People drive by, they go to the church. Signs are important. We had an ugly looking sign before. This is our new sign. It was like small budget little church, right? I think solo pastor. It's just me and my wife. By the time we got this one, I had an associate guy who worked. But basically, we stained some boards. You put some varnish on it. You go to Home Depot. You buy some white plastic sheeting, and you trace it out the letters. You cut them out, and you put them up on the sign, and you have a decent-looking sign that's on the cheap. You could go get some pallets from down at Home Depot and stain them and do this. It is possible. It doesn't have to be expensive. It just has to be refreshed, ready for the next generation. Do it. Take the time to make the effort. Another way people find churches is they see an ad, which I don't really like advertising for churches. It feels a little markety, and that's not necessarily our heart. But when people are looking for it, that's the reason businesses advertise, not because they want to generate the desire, but that someone's looking, and you put your name out in front of them. And so you can advertise. In fact, one way that we found that was really effective is there is this website you can look up. It's called the New Movers for Church. And you can, for a small amount, each month they will send you the list of people who moved into your city. It's $15 a month. And you buy some stamps, some postcard stamps, and you order some postcards, and you mail everyone. I originally tried to have the church individually write people. That didn't help. Don't do that. But we just end up with a standard little postcard that we send out to everyone who moves into our city, saying, hey, welcome to Washington. We have a lot of military folks who come into the area, and so we send them out a postcard saying, hey, welcome to town. We're glad you're here. Here's our church. If you have questions, if there's something we can do to be a blessing. But get your name out there. Real basics. It worked. And as a reminder, the last bullet point I have on here is that God's Spirit moves people, and He does, and we should be praying for. And I encourage, and we did this at our church for a long time, that we'd start our services. We're getting ready in the morning. The first thing we do, we'd stop and pray that, Lord, that you would send some folks our way, that you would send people, and He did, and we stepped out in faith. And He did, and He can do it for you too. Doesn't matter if you're old or young, where your church is at, God is at work. And when we're bold and walk by faith, He can do something amazing. Number 2, so people are showing up. And I had this problem that people were showing up, and the older folks who were showing up stuck around, but the younger folks who showed up weren't. They would be one and go. And I don't know if you keep track of these things, but you should. You should keep track of folks who are showing up as first-time guests and folks who then stick around. And it'll tell you a little bit about the flavor and where you're at as a church. Because we were, even though I was a young speaker, the rest of my church was very, very old. The average age of my church when I got there was probably 65 or 70. Like we were way, way over on one side. And so this was the issue, like, hey, how are people going to stick around? And so here's the question, what makes people stick? Why do people stay at a particular church? Like, how does that work? I boiled it down to, I think, 3 things are really important for how we stick. And I think, and they're in 2 different orders. If you're a mature believer, I think the order starts at the bottom and goes up. I think if you're an immature believer, it starts at the top and goes down. And so the first option is cultural connection, meaningful relationships, and biblical truth. And so since I'm assuming you're all a mature audience, we're going to start at the bottom and work our way up, okay? So start up is you speak truth, biblical truth. At my church, I teach through. I'm not a big fancy preacher. I teach through the Bible verse by verse, exegetically, just normal Bible teaching like you learn in seminary how to do. And most of the people at my church are there because they want that. All of the young people at my church are there because they wanted Bible teaching. In fact, almost every single one of those people who showed at my church, they're there because, not because of the music, not because of anything, because the Word of God is being preached, and they walk away understanding it. That's why they're there, and you can do that too. Here's me at my church, and this is what I do. We just teach through books of the Bible verse by verse. It works. In fact, I had a good friend of mine who is a retired pastor. He did interim ministry, and he was an old guy, 70 years old, at a younger church, and the young guys loved him. He was great because he taught the Word. And it's not like that they didn't want that. They did. People do want that. Don't be afraid. There's no watering down required. That's not the case at all. Content matters. Less politics and less quotes, less impersonal stories, more of us, more of our lives being shared, and more Bible. That's what young people need. I think that's what we all want and need, actually, but young folks in particular are going to keep looking until they find that. Okay, there's so much, there's infinite fluff available online anytime you want, day or night. The next generation is serious. They want content. They don't want fluff. At the end of each of my message, though, and it's so interesting, yesterday I had this German exchange student come to church, first-time guest, visiting with him afterwards, and he said, hey, this was good. This is like the Bible teaching I'm used to, but you did something different. At the end, you connected with something we should do with it. And I'm a very, very boring preacher, because at the end of my message, I literally put up a slide that says, so what? And then I proceed to take the last 5 minutes or so and talk about so what? In 2022 or 2021, what do we do with this? And I just very simply kind of talk about the applications, and I don't try to weave it all in. It's like we teach what it says, what it means, the interpretation, and then we do the application, and we throw it up, we talk about it, and people like it. They're growing. They are like, hey, that's impactful. It's clear. It's simple. It doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be complicated, but these applications matter. It's not just head theology, but it's a combination of theology and something to do with it. And so I just encourage all of us grace teachers just to be reminded that grace is not just salvation. It's not just justification. It's grace flows out in every aspect of our lives. And I feel if anything, we in the FGA community, sometimes we're so strong about the gospel, and it's good for good reason. But we need to be just as strong taking that and fleshing it out into our Christian life and helping folks understand that we walk by grace, that we live by grace, that we're saved by grace, that we're kept by grace, it's everything. And I think it's important for us to keep reminding people of that. Another thing young people enjoy is addressing hard topics. And if you don't have an idea of what are some good hard topics, I'd recommend this book from Rebecca Mikkelsen. She's from the UK. And so they're a little ahead of us, and the book was published in 2019, right before the pandemic. But these topics are, I was asking some of the young people in my church, I gave them the list of the hot topics. Hey, what things would you like to wrestle with as they come up in the scriptures? And I was asking for like your top 5 or your top 10 of this list. And they're all like, I want all of these. Don't skip any. We want them all, because these are the issues that people are dealing with. Aren't we better off without religion? Doesn't Christianity crush diversity? How can you say there's only one true faith? Like those are the issues. And so I would encourage you to check out our book. It's quite good. It gives you some topics to bring up. In fact, what we did at our church is, again, we go through whole books of the Bible verse by verse, but at Easter time, we pause. And after Easter, I do 4 weeks of answering hard questions. As it's really an invitation to folks who show up at Easter to address some topics topically that they're interested in. And so this is all we do. We just pick some hard topics and we go through them. And they are the most watched online, most commented on videos are those hard question weeks. My most clicked on, most commented on, most watched video that we've ever done was this one topic here. Isn't the Bible all ancient morality, promoting slavery, misogyny, and homophobia? Yeah, those are the issues that young people are facing with. And I have a little insight into it because I have a couple of teenagers, right? My oldest kid's 13-year-old, and the same gal writes a book for teens. It's quite good. In fact, I gave it to my daughter last year about the same time we were doing this series. And she's like, Dad, can I give this book away? I have several non-Christian friends who would be blessed by reading it. And like when the next generation wants to take your material and run with it and give it to their friends, that gives you a hint that you're getting close to the issues that you need to be speaking on. And so highly recommend that book. By the way, I have a little website at the very end. I have all this material, resources, all the links online. I'll give you the link. So if you're taking photos of the slides, just know that I will give them away to you. I know she just put out another book 2 weeks ago called Is Christmas Unbelievable? It's a tiny little one of those giveaway books for the holidays, answering questions like, well, can we even believe in Christmas? I really think Christmas is one of the most effective times for churches to be reaching out. If you're looking for something to do for Christmas, it's like 4 topics. You could do it for Advent in 4 weeks. I might do it this year or next year, but it's the meat that young people are looking for. If you're trying to stay up to date on modern issues, how do you do that, right? Because especially if you're a little bit older, how do you stay up with modern culture? I don't recommend watching a whole bunch of TV. It's junk. But here's a good resource that I've really appreciated. There is a really neat ministry in Ohio called, it used to be called Zenos Christian Fellowship. It's now called Dwell. And they're elders. They're in a college town. They do college ministry all the time. And their elders each month recommend 2 books. And you can get signed up to this book club and basically ask you, do you want A or B? And they give you 2 book options that they read through. But they all deal with the issues that young folks are dealing with because they're leading a younger church. And so for $15 a month, you can have insight into, hey, what's a good book I should be reading? Highly recommended it. I've really enjoyed. In fact, I think Rebecca's book that I saw in the first place came from this exact service, but a way of being in touch with what's coming out. And do we always agree with every part of it? No way. But it does help us have a pulse on where our world is going and where the young people are at. Okay, how else do people stick? Well, so 1, you teach them truth. Number 2, there's opportunities for meaningful relationships. I encourage you to teach and encourage people to invest in people. Nothing else on this planet lasts forever other than people. And I say that from the pulpit often to encourage my church, like, hey, people matter, and we need to invest into that. And on a practical level, it really comes in to small groups and making sure that, hey, we design group environments where relationships can happen. And of course, that probably looks a little bit different for every church where you're at, but I would just encourage you, it matters a lot. It matters a ton. In fact, most of the young folks that are really integrated in our church, they're in small groups that are led by young folks, and they're able to make those connections. And so those are very, very important. And then you get to my favorite topic. Culture, style, preference. I have a little quote here I want to read to you. And I want you to help me figure out when was this written? And your choices is 1723, 1820, or 1873, 1923, or 1973? Which one do you think this is? Let me read it to you. It says, on worship, there are several reasons for opposing it. 1, it's too new. 2, it's often worldly, even blasphemous. The new Christian music is not as pleasant as the more established style. Because there's so many songs, you can't learn them all. It puts too much emphasis on instrumental music rather than godly lyrics. This new music creates disturbances, making people act indecently and disorderly. The preceding generation got along without it. It's a money-making scene, and some of the new music upstarts are lewd and loose. Okay, so how many people think that was 1973? Okay, how many people think that was 1923? Anyone 1873? How about 1723? Okay, the people with their hands up, the 2 of you, you're right. Okay, that was written attacking a pastor in 1723, attacking none other than Isaac Watts, writer of the hymns you may have heard, I Survey the Wondrous Cross, Joy to the World, or O God, Our Help in Ages Past. Okay, every single generation has music that they like. And then the next generation comes along, and it's time to play some new music. It's kind of a sad story for me, but the truth was that all of my worship team left this little church. We didn't do any really quick changes. It took me about a year, but we made some changes slowly, but my entire team left. But here's the interesting thing. After that, there's actually, we'll come back to these 2 slides. Let me show you the chart, though. There's a break in the chart. Guess when my worship team left? Yeah, at the end of the green arrow. That's when they all left. And they were trying. They were making some of the changes I'd recommended. I attempted as much as possible to practice this model of 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, and folks would say, hey, we didn't do that very well. And it's like, well, we weren't perfect, but trying to do 1/3 of music that was going to be multi-generational, 1/3 of songs that this body knew, because I think congregationally being able to participate in worship is important, and having people sing stuff they know, which means you play the same song a whole lot more frequently than your worship guy wants, because they practice, and then they warm up, and then they do it, and so they've listened to it 3 times every time someone in your church has, and so you have to do it way more than they want. And then some new stuff that people have heard on the radio. And pick smart music that's lyrically correct. Don't be dumb about it. But this is so important. If you're in a situation, this is where I found myself, my band couldn't do it. They couldn't do some of the new music I wanted to do. And so this is what we did. It was quite simple. I ended my message with a song that was relevant to what the teaching was, that was biblically accurate, and I played a lyric video of it. And guess what? Enough young people stuck around that they could handle a couple of the hymns up front and a couple of other songs. They liked the message. And the song at the end that was played via video that we stood up and sang together, it resonated with them, and they stuck around. And then that happened again and again, and eventually we had 3 or 4 families who were sticking around, and then suddenly you had enough critical mass where people showed up, and then people started, other worship team members joined in, and it all worked on itself. And so it is possible, and I just want to encourage you, if you are of the generation that is holding on to your music, give it away. Give it away. Focus on who you'd rather reach rather than who you're trying to keep. Because of those, for every person who left my church because of worship, this year I baptized one person for every single person who left. And I'd say if as churches together, if we have to lose people in order to baptize people, then let's lose them so that we can share the gospel of grace. It's worth giving up, I think, if we're going to be able to share truth. And I don't mean that in a mean way, and I'd rather not have that be the case. Like, I hope that we can get to a place where that's not the case, but if we have to, do it. Share the gospel. Have people want to hear. Every person who shows up to your church under the age of 40 is going to watch a video, you're live streaming, right, because it's COVID. They're going to watch an online video on their phone or on their computer and make a decision whether they're going to go to your church or not based on what they see on that video. And don't don't worry about so much about the music, because the music online on live streams is almost universally terrible. Even if you have a good tech team, trying to get online streaming to sound good is very, very difficult. And so I don't even recommend necessarily even keeping that per se, unless you have a dream team like they have here. Here is quite good, by the way, the tech team back here. We watch every once in a while, but don't even worry about that. Have your messages online. But even more important than the hearing part, and that is important, is the visual. This is what the church looked like when I got there. This would have been, and I actually never put the video of that on my website. I never videotaped it. I never showed it, not even once. We posted audio-only messages, because that is kind of scary, okay? From my generation, at least, where I come from, that is scary. In fact, I used that pulpit once, and then we got rid of it as soon as I got there. Very first week, I didn't even give chance, we're not even going to warm up. I candidated with it, and then it's gone. The person who helped put the mural in, I don't know, ages ago, they came in, they were a little afraid that they were going to leave because you were going to paint over the mural and destroy that, and they said, it looked old when we put it in. It looked old when we put it in. So this is what we did. We spent about $1,000, and we painted the back wall, and we put some wood on the stage, and it worked. And it was a good video background. A person in the church, got some, stained some boards, threw it up there for less than $1,000. It looks good on camera, and you want your look on camera to be good if you want next generation folks to show up. It's even better is you spend $200 and throw a couple fill lights on there, and then you're all set. It does not have to be expensive at all. It's cheap. And it doesn't even have to blow the seniors away. Here at our church, I did the screen where in the video frame is fresh and up to date. I haven't had money or time and ability to do the rest of the room. It's kind of where it is. And so it took about 2 months or so for my seniors to kind of get used to the darker wall in the back. But what really made all the difference was that during COVID and everything, all of the seniors' kids were commenting because they were suddenly able to see what was happening at Grandma's church. And Grandma's church looked pretty good. And they're like, hey, Grandma or Grandpa, hey, your church is looking awesome. What's going on? This is exciting. In fact, we've had many of the kids of people from the church show up and comment on, hey, this is going great. This is wonderful, because they're seeing life. And so our senior folks are able to say, hey, this is worth it. It's worth giving up some of our preferences because we see the fruit. Okay, style. It's crazy, but I think it's important. Learn how to use presentation graphics. I think some people are so good. Some people are natural speakers and they're just great orators. I'm not one of those folks. Maybe if you are, wonderful. I'm so glad you have the ability. Most of us, though, I think learn better multimedia, visual learners. That whole see it, hear it, feel it, touch, all the senses together.